Welcome to the Whiskey Vault. I'm Daniel, Chancellor of Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. Today we are answering the question, whiskey or whiskey? That is with an E or without an E? And the answer is, who cares? And everyone does it slightly differently and there's no real rules. Let's drink some whiskey. A lot of this information for this video, I mean, you can see this written about everywhere, but of all the research that I looked for, like someone who did a really nice, help me frame this for people on camera, my favorite was the whiskey professor at scotchwhiskey.com. Just did a really great synopsis and ended with like, which is basically was exactly what I had written down. So go check his stuff out too. But first, both forms of the word whiskey come from Gaelic, right? Irish and Scottish in obvious directions. But it's Uskabe, Uskabetha, Aquavit, right? There's variations of this. All of these end up becoming the term whiskey. Sorry. And originally, everywhere you saw it, it had no E. And then by the late 1800s, the Irish were all of a sudden spelling it with an E. Why? Well, it's argued that it was marketing. It's argued that there was a time when Irish whiskey wanted to differentiate itself from Scottish whiskey, and the direction that they took was by adding the E to the letter, and that was, for some reason, people think that little of Irish whiskey marketers. I guess Irish whiskey had great marketing ideas, and I don't know. Maybe it's true. There's people who've said it. There's records of people saying it. I don't really know, because if you actually go read the things they wrote, they end up going back and forth. So at one point, there's an Irish document. Sorry, hang on. That smells amazing. Okay, that smells great. Okay, so at one point, there was an Irish document in, 1870-something, where they wrote about the evils of grain whiskey, because remember, this is during the fight over whether or not Column Still grain whiskey is real. And in that entire article that was written by the Irish, they spelled it with no E. So, oops. So it's not like in stone. And then there was actually another book called The Truths, and that book is called The Truths About Whiskey. There was another book, and that was, or a pamphlet that the Scots wrote, where they spelled it the whole time with an E around the same time. So which way did it go? Well, who knows? And it was Charles McLean in the Scotch: A Liquid History that said basically it was a standard after the early 1900s that the Irish used E and the Scots didn't. So what about America and everybody else? It's not as easy and simple as it sounds, and really the answer is no one cares. But I'm answering this question because people ask it all the time, and so I'm going to give you, this is the reason why, and this is all we know. But first, we're going to drink Teeling. I found this on the store shelf. They left me one of something else, but this one I found on the store shelf myself in town. It came out of this box on the shelf, which I thought was really cool. And it opens up on the side. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And so I set that aside. But this is a series that they're doing called Wonders of Wood. And they're using it both to explore wood impact, and they're also using it to give back and help build forests in Ireland, which I think is super cool. But this is a pot still, and this was aged in Chinkapin casks, Chinkapin oak, which is a Midwestern / Middle American oak species that is a sort of variant. It's not American white oak. It's not Quercus alba. It's actually, it's like Quercus muhlenbergi or something like that. It's another species. It's actually got more in common with the spicy European Spanish oak than it has with American white oak. But I sent an email to Robert at Teeling, who is a great human being and always responds and gives me a ton of information about what we're drinking, and he did not drop the ball. he gave me some really cool stuff I get to tell you guys. And so first, I'm going to give my own impressions on the nose. And this is around 5 years old, he said. Ooh, round butterscotch and spice, a little bit of shortbread, and then baking spices just kind of pop out of the glass. As the sort of general sweetness starts to subside, it gets a little darker and a little more wooden, but not oaky. Just like musty. Like a wet ship's deck carrying spices from the Middle East. How's that for a floral description? Ooh, it's spicy. Ooh, it's spicy on the palate too. Wow. I would almost argue zesty, like lemon zest, strong lemon zest twist on top of vanilla cream and a little bit of tannins. Wow. It's bitey. %. It really, okay, this is gonna be weird, but if you had told me that this was a used oak rye, you could have convinced me. It's not. There are a bunch of markers that take it away from that, but if you had just said, hey, try this used oak rye, I would have thought, that smells really weird for a rye, and I would have tasted it and thought, oh yeah, there's all the rye baking spices. Something that's a little off in here though. This is the spiciest pot still whiskey I've ever tried in my life. This is very interesting. I do want to add a little more water. What he said was, they are exploring oak variants, and they tried this. And by the way, this is a virgin cask, so you're getting a really high wood impact. They said Chinkapin had more dry wood spice like cinnamon, coffee, nutmeg, sweeter vanillins, coconut, honey, mint, and then they started going into other oaks. They went into different weird French and European oaks and Swedish oaks, and they're trying a whole bunch of different things with this series. He said this one was pot still that was distilled in 2017. It's about 5 years old. And the bottle date, by the way, he can correct this when he watches this video. The bottle date, where do I even see the bottle date? 12/12? I don't know. There's a stamp up here that says L2104436512:12. Maybe that will tell them what one we're working on here. But this is one of the more unique Irish whiskeys I've ever tried. This is very interesting. Okay. Oh, that's good. With water, it turns more into a pot still whiskey, and the spice becomes a surrounding accent instead of a first explosion of flavor. I like it a lot with a little water. It's really still the spiciest pot still whiskey I've ever had in my life. But I love how creative Teeling is and how willing to try and risk things Alex is to play around with things. And I just love that. And they're all just really good human beings when I've hung out with them. Okay, let's go back to America, or let's say North America, so Canada and America. The next thing that you find is, well, American, the traditional word is, well, in Canada, they spell it like Scotland, and in America, they spell it like Ireland. And that is sort of true, that American overall has sort of adopted whiskey with an E as its generic standard spelling, and Canada has sort of adopted as its generic spelling no E, the Scottish styling. And if you go across the entire world, you find people who are influenced by Scotland tend to spell it without an E, and people who are influenced by Ireland tend to spell it with an E. But it's not that simple in the US or in Canada. In Canada, they mostly stuck with no E, but there are a few who put the E in. And in the US, they mostly stuck with an E, but go look at Dickel and Maker's Mark. No E. And to make it even more complicated, the Federal Beverage Code for TTB spells whiskey in its entire massive Bible of a document without an E the entire time. So the American Federal Beverage Code says whiskey is to be spelled without an E. So how's that for conflicting information? The answer is spell it with an E, spell it without an E, who cares? As long as you enjoy what you're drinking. Cheers to you, and I'm really glad you're here. Spell whiskey with an E, spell whiskey without an E. Spell it with a silent L, spell it while standing on one leg. No matter how, like and subscribe.